Hello and welcome to another Game Nexus arcade video. Today we're going to be taking a look at Virtua Fighter 4 version C on the Naomi 2 GD-Rom hardware, or should I say another look at. Now, when I'd originally made this video a while back, I had thought that Aoi, who's right next to Lei Fei there, was one of the new characters for Virtua Fighter 4, and as you may or may not know, it turns out I wasn't right about that, because Lei Fei here and Vanessa Lewis are the actual new characters for this game. So I figured I wanted to actually do a arcade video where I show one of the new characters for the game instead of like one of the older characters. But as I said back then, it goes without saying that this game is a beautiful game, as you can see, just by looking at this footage. But one thing I do have to comment that I've actually had people say they like how that video looked better than some of the other Virtua Fighter stuff I've shown. But, I actually had the color balanced wrong on the old video, so everything looked a bit more red and warm, if you will. But this one is going to look true color as it should look. And of course, Lei Fei here is like a monk, and he has this really cool, like, fighting style where he has such nice combos that flow together so nicely, as compared to, like, the other characters who have, like, a bit of a different fighting style. Now, I want to give you a bit of history about Virtua Fighter 4 here. I'm just going to more or less read off what I have on one of the sites I was looking at here. Now, the Naomi 2 arcade version of Virtua Fighter 4 uses up to 20,000 polygons for each character, and while each background uses over 50,000 polygons. Now, to put that into perspective, if you recall my Virtua Fighter video, the game from 1993, that game used about 2,000 polygons per character, maybe a little bit more. So now, like, basically 3 generations later, you have 10 times the polygons per character. That's why all the characters look so sharp. And if you recall correctly, I believe it was the platforms were only made out of like 500 polygons. So now this is like 100 times the background detail, because if you recall correctly on Virtua Fighter 1, or Virtua Fighter if you will, there was only actually just a platform, no real background. It just was a bitmap in the background. But now with this, you have these fully involved 3D backgrounds as opposed to the more simplistic platform with like basically a picture being wrapped around. And let's go on here. With up to 16 hardware light sources per polygon at 60 frames per second. This was the highest character polygon count and lights per character for a video game up until 2001, giving the most detailed character graphics and lighting effects of its time, such as the dramatic searchlights. In comparison, the same year, Dead or Alive 3 for the Xbox only used 10,000 to 15,000 polygons for the characters, while Halo on Xbox only used 20,000 polygons for Master Chief and up to 4 hardware light sources. And the funny part is Virtua Fighter 4's character polygon count was unsurpassed until Virtua Fighter 5 came out 4 years later in 2005. And people have argued with me on this, saying that the PlayStation 2 version of Virtua Fighter was like arcade perfect, but the PlayStation 2 version of Virtua Fighter 4, however, they reduced the polygon count down to only 7,000 for the characters and had much fewer light sources. So, more or less what you see here is, like, the characters at least are more than 2 times the rendering of what you're seeing on PlayStation 2, or at least the original Virtua Fighter. They did, as I had mentioned in my Virtua Fighter 4 Evolution video, they did a bit better job in the graphics department for Virtua Fighter 4 Evolution in the PlayStation 2 version, but it still was a little bit lower than the arcade version. And now, like its predecessors, Virtua Fighter 4 saw minor upgrades during the course of its lifespan, titled Version B, and of course what we see here, Version C. And it was ported to the PlayStation 2 in 2002 with, as I said, the graphical downgrades and online modes removed in exchange for more single-player options. Because if you recall correctly, I don't know if anybody here has played the PlayStation 2 version, it kind of had what was called like an arcade story mode thing, which in my opinion was a real bit strange. It was kind of like, this is the experience you have if you played at the arcade, because you get to play with quote-unquote different players, which more or less were just AI-controlled characters that you would actually fight. And now here's the whole tail of the tape, if you will. Now, it doesn't seem like I have any information on the much older versions, but it would look like the original version of Virtua Fighter 4 here came out in Japan in, in February of 2001 as a cartridge. Then it looks like sometime later in that year, the revised GD-Rom versions got released in Japan, which is what you're seeing here. And then, of course, even later in that year, as unfortunately I don't have a date, but in 2001, Europe and the United States also saw a cartridge release, which was the 840-0080C in a cartridge. It wasn't until January 31st of 2002 that this game was ported to PlayStation 2 in Japan, and then March 17th of 2002 it was ported to PlayStation 2 in the USA, with a greatest hits release for America coming out sometime in 2003. Now, on April 10th of 2002 is when Europe got their PlayStation 2 version, and then it just tells me sometime in 2002 got released to Australia. And the thing I think is the most annoying with Vanessa is that you'll do a punch and she'll just grab your hand. And I don't know if it's like, I don't have the game set to like uber hard mode or something, but it seems like the AI just holds on to your hand for a while. Maybe if I let them, they would actually do a move to me, but they end up not doing anything at all. But that's the only thing that's annoying. It's almost as annoying as like Jackie's quote-unquote automatic combos. Automatic counters that he had in some of the Virtua Fighter games, were more or less, if you're playing as Jackie and you just press no buttons and the enemy attacks you, he'll just like grab one of your hands or something. And one thing that's actually an interesting thing to know here is that the game was originally announced under the working title of Virtua Fighter X, before appearing with its final name at the AOU show 2001 in Japan. But then again, a lot of games kind of have that whole working title thing, where the developer doesn't know what they're going to call it, but you know, it doesn't make any sense to actually end up calling it Virtua Fighter X, when you could just easily just call it Virtua Fighter 4. It'd be like if Sega came out with another Virtua Fighter game, and instead of calling it Virtua Fighter 6, they called it Virtua Fighter Next, or Super, or Shin Virtua Fighter Challenge Fighters, or something. Well, I could understand a name like that if they just basically took Virtua Fighter 5, ported it to Xbox One and PlayStation 4, and then just added a couple little things. And now, I definitely have to say the funny thing here is, there have been so many times that I have fought Jackie, where he has more or less, like, had his AI, so over the top, trying to beat you, that he's almost felt broken. And I remember when I was actually recording this footage, I was thinking to myself, oh man, he's gonna totally destroy me here, and I'm not gonna, like, beat him for, like, an hour or something. But sure enough, I somehow beat him without losing once, and I was like, yeah, this is gonna stop really quick, because, you know, when you're trying to record video game footage, it's kind of like the, I call it to the extent of, like, acting, because what you're basically doing here is you're trying to nail, like, a decent run, so you don't look, like, horribly awful at the game. So, what I often find is, like, when I'm playing the game without the capture hardware hooked up, I'll play it really well, because it's more or less that whole nobody's watching you type thing, so you're just playing this by yourself, and you're the only one who sees this. Whereas then I'll hook up the capture hardware, and yeah, I won't play nearly as well, because I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be the video, I'm going to do it this time, it's going to be done. But, this time I happened to nail a pretty decent run, and I can tell you right now, this was my first try. This isn't like, a lot of times, if you look at my capture software, you'll see Virtua Fighter 4 gameplay version 1, and I forget what game it was, but there's one game where I had like up to version 6, and then finally version 6 or 7 was what you saw in the video, because I just couldn't nail that perfect run until I got into that zone, if you will. And of course, as I said, like, if you look at stages like this, it goes without saying, the backgrounds are just breathtaking, and they're just amazing, if you ask me. Like, you look at a game, up to and including this level, you look to one of these fighting games, and you think to yourself, this looks like a place I could actually be. It looks like a real, live place. Whereas if you look at, like, some of the older games, you think they look kind of cartoony, not so realistic. But, like, for instance, you could think that the place we're fighting in here is like a real place in the world. It's not just some fantasy setting like in some really early fighting games. And I will admit, I did lose to Shun-Di once. But I was able to edit the video in such a way that unless you looked at the time clock, you wouldn't have noticed that. But I was happy it was only once because, he didn't really, like, totally kill me. And a lot of times when I've actually wanted to play this as Shun-Di and make that as a video, I've gotten to him like this late in the stage, because with Virtua Fighter 4, well, Virtua Fighter 4, the original version, there are 12 stages and then the final stage and the bonus stage, whereas with any version after, I know I've probably mentioned this already in my other videos, but any version after, there are 10 stages, final stage and bonus stage, which, honestly, I think it's cooler that you get more stages in the earlier version. I have no idea why they cut it out. Maybe they thought it was too hard or it took too long. I would say it was probably the whole, let's shorten an arcade playthrough to get the player off the cabinet quicker. And of course, the VF.net stuff is the ability for machines to be networked, which of course, since I'm just doing this at home, and honestly at this point, considering this game came out in 2001, I doubt Sega still has any of that stuff still active. Just like if you looked at my initial D videos, you'll see the characters will say go to a website and upload your score to the world ranking. If you go to that website, it doesn't exist anymore because they're not going to leave a website for like the original 3 versions of Initial D or the original 3 versions of Virtua Fighter Online when they're supporting the later versions. And one thing is funny, I actually just learned this yesterday, which I didn't know, but Virtua Fighter 5 Final Tuned version B actually had just been released last year in the arcades. I didn't even know that. So it actually is pretty cool to see that Sega is still supporting Virtua Fighter, even though we haven't had a brand new Virtua Fighter game for almost 11 years now, since 5 came out in 2005, and it's now 2016 at the time I'm recording this video. But you never know, by the time you're actually watching this, Virtua Fighter 6, Virtua Fighter 6 Super Evolution Maximum Super Battle Ultimate Final Tuned version for Final Showdown Master Service could be out. I know it's not going to be that crazy, but you know Sega, if they make a Virtua Fighter 6, it's going to have like at least 3 or 4 revisions. And of course, I know it goes without saying that Sarah is my favorite character, and I was like so afraid going into this match that I was going to like be defeated so many times. And I'm glad I didn't end up doing too badly. And no matter what, her original blue/black outfit will always be iconic to me. It's always like that outfit, like Akira Yuki always wearing his white karate gi. It's just that outfit that you see on the character and you're like, yeah, that's that character, plain and simple. And now here is the final stage, which is always Akira in every Virtua Fighter game.
Fight one. Ready, go!
And if you looked at the clock there, I did lose once to Akira. And when this originally started, it actually had started as it was all light out, but then it got dark, which I think actually looks cooler with all the lanterns and everything. You get to see some of the nice light sourcing in this game, and it really shows off the power of the Naomi 2 hardware, which, as I had mentioned with those polygon counts, was honestly way ahead of its time. Now you'll see, for some reason it's gone from dark to light. I guess maybe the fighters took a break between rounds, and now it's the next day. That's my only guess. Or it's just the system just randomly assigning a time and day to the time that you're fighting. And you'll even notice the shadow detail is really nice. It's not like the old fighting games where basically your shadow would be like a circle around your feet, because that's all the game could render. But when you saw it and you thought to yourself, it's kind of cool that there even are shadows, but yeah, every little nuance of this game, like, every time I play this game, I probably see something else that I'm like, wow, look at that, that's amazing. And I know I've probably mentioned it in all other videos, but my first time playing Virtua Fighter 5 was at a local arcade in the mall that was called Jolly Time, which of course I thought was a popcorn reference, but it wasn't. It was just what they called the arcade. And it was a Virtua Fighter 4 upright machine. And shortly after that, I bought the PlayStation 2 version of the game, which of course I still own because I never sell or give up any of my games. And one thing you'll notice now is the bonus stage does not take up your time. So whatever time you had at the end here, that will be the time that you'll get on the high scores. I don't know, it's just like in my Virtua Fighter 2 game. I was doing pretty well there, but then I just completely lost it. And I know I've mentioned it probably in every Virtua Fighter video I've ever done, but the only time I've actually defeated Doral in anything above Virtua Fighter was Virtua Fighter 4 Final 2 that I once played with Sarah. Doral ringed herself out once, and then either the second or third round, I actually legitimately defeated her. And if you look on my channel discussion on my YouTube channel here, you'll notice I actually had made a note when that happened. And I forget my exact words, but it was like myself being very surprised that I actually had defeated Doral. And it wasn't until later that I got the Sega Model 1 hardware and the Model 3 hardware, because in both of those games, off camera of course, like I'd mentioned earlier, I seem to get a bit more nervous when I'm playing a game when I'm recording it, so for some reason I don't play as well, and I've not been able to defeat Doral in Virtua Fighter or Virtua Fighter 3 since the, like, 1 or 2 times. I know the first time I played Virtua Fighter with Sarah, I actually defeated Doral, and I know with Virtua Fighter 3, I had played it with Sarah and Pai-chan, and both of those 2 times I had beaten Doral, and I was thinking to myself, oh wow, she's so easy in Virtua Fighter 3. And of course, I think I jinxed myself, because in saying that, I've never done it in Virtua Fighter 3 since. And basically what you see in the Virtua Fighter 2 arcade video is the only time I'd ever played against Doral, because it seems like if I'm not playing as Sarah, I just get like beaten down really hard in that game, and I just have not gotten to Doral again since. But yeah, it goes without saying, now that I've given you a video of Virtua Fighter 4 with one of the new characters in it, this game is just a beautiful game. It's just an excellent game to play. And if you use the PlayStation 2 version, the emulated arcade version, or you run it on a good old-fashioned Naomi 2 like I do here, I highly recommend you play Virtua Fighter 4, especially the original arcade version, because it is just such an excellent game that I can, there's no way I can recommend it more. And that's been another Game Nexus arcade video, and I shall